everyone. Okay, I'm here today. I'm going to do a very brief, hopefully, wrap up of my October reading. Alright, so I'm going to try to do this in order of when I finished books and see if I can remember that. The first book I finished in October was Disintegrate, Dissociate by Arielle Twist. Arielle Twist is a two-spirit poet. She is Canadian, and I'm just wanting to make sure that she goes by she. Yes, she does. She is First Nation. She wrote this very raw and very powerful collection of poetry. I just love this cover. I think it is probably my favorite cover of 2019. Just so beautiful. These poems are very much about the experience of being a two-spirit transgender woman and how that applies to your sexuality and your relationships with men and with the people you are attracted to, in her case men, in her life. And they were very eye-opening for me, having grown up as a cisgendered woman. I just could never have understood a perspective like hers without reading about it this way. So I think that these poems, some of them were just beautiful. Some of them were harder to read because you can really feel the pain and the confusion and the frustration that she's feeling through her words. So I think in that way she's a very gifted poet. I'm very excited to see what she will do in the future with her work, and how her poetry will evolve from kind of this place of where, I could definitely relate to her focusing on her need to be loved physically, emotionally, just being accepted for who she is, and how hopefully when she finds that acceptance, how she will evolve as a human being, I think would be fascinating to learn. The next book I finished was Eminent Victorians by Lyndon Strachey. I will say, of course, I didn't actually read the whole thing. I read a portion of this book. I read the introduction, the preface, and the section on Florence Nightingale. Lyndon Strachey, of course, is not a Victorian author, because we're talking about my Victober reads as well in this video. But he did write about prominent Victorian celebrities, and the Florence Nightingale section was the one that I wanted to read the most. And I thought he was a great writer, really enjoyed the section on Florence Nightingale. And I think that I'm going to delve into Florence Nightingale in more detail, and I hope to share that next Victober. So something to look forward to, as if there wasn't enough already. But I really was interested by her life. She was a very powerful woman in a time when there weren't a lot of powerful women, and so I understand where her reputation has come from, and I would definitely want to read more about her and delve into her character a little bit more. So I don't know if I will read the rest of the book. The other men who he writes about in here are not men that I feel very interested in learning more about. You never know. But for now, this is probably the most I will read out of this one. The next book I finished was The Collected Stories by Oscar Wilde. I listened to this on audio, and I did not know this when I chose the book to read, but the stories in The Collected Stories are mostly stories that Wilde developed as entertainment during parties and in parlors, and so they were stories that he created orally, developed orally, and then later on wrote down. So I found that really entertaining to listen to. He had some great stories in there, some ghost stories, some stories about murder, most of them were very good. There were a couple that I thought were just not for me, but for the most part, I really enjoyed them, and I definitely feel confident now to move into some of his novel and just delve deeper into his character in general, because I think I really like the vibe that he put out in his writing. So very excited to explore more of Oscar Wilde. The next book I finished was Wives and Daughters by Elisabeth Gaskell. So I decided to read this with Tanya, the sampler girl, as a buddy read, and then Tanya decided that she was not going to finish this book because it was not for her. And I think I understand part of why it wasn't her type of a book. It is a very deeply character-driven book, and it's quiet, and things move slowly, and especially for the first 200 to 300 pages, you know, you're moving at a pace that's not quick at all. And is the payoff worth it? And I would say yes, the payoff is worth it. However, I have not heard one person when talking about this book talk about the fact that this book was not finished, and so I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone who's considering reading this book in the future, and if you haven't read it yet. Elisabeth Gaskell died before she finished this book, and I don't think overall it ruined my experience in any way. However, there's a love story in here that you really want to pay off. You know, you've read over 600 pages. You want the payoff of this love story. And then you get to the end and you don't get the payoff. You get a glimmer that it's going to be paid off, but she never was able to finish the book. She died before she finished it. So you don't get that really satisfying thing that I feel like the characters deserved. And so there are many things that I liked about the book. I loved how subtly she commented on women's roles in society, women's roles in the home, women's roles to their own selves be true in that sense. It made me sad that a lot of the things that the girls were dealing with at this time frame are still things that girls have to deal with today. I loved some of her characters, and I loved the way she reveals characters. So she doesn't give you a lot at first, and you gotta believe that she's gonna give you more to hold on to in the characters, and she does. And she moves them. You get snippets sometimes at a snail's pace, but for me, that really increased my attachment to the characters. So I did really love them. Most of them. I mean, the ones I didn't like, I really didn't like them, but that's okay because you can't like everybody. So again, Cynthia got a lot of time for her romantic relationships. Molly did not, even though Molly deserved it. So those are my two critiques of the book. I have a feeling that I'm going to be more of a North and South girl than a Wives and Daughters girl. And that's because I think North and South this is just an assumption, is more succinct. Also, I think North and South have more social commentary, more economic commentary, more just a general overview of Victorian society that I will find more interesting to dig my teeth into than this one. But having said that, I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it as a read, so I'm very happy that I read it. And the last book, I have technically one small little story in here to finish, but I'm counting it as an October book. I would have finished it last night, but my eyes were too tired, and it's the first today. The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. This is a collection of short stories, the first title story being The Bloody Chamber. And I would say it is the best story in here. It is gothic, it is sensual, it is dark and moody. And I would say Angela Carter is a great writer, quite entertaining, very beautiful descriptions of nature, and she writes, this book was published in 1970, and these stories were written during the 1970s. This is actually part of my 1970s project. This is my 1979 read. If you don't know about my 1970s project, I will put the link to that down below so you can have a listen. But basically I picked 10 books representing the first installment of the project, and this is one of those books. And it's a great book to read during October. It's very spooky. There's stories about vampires, there's stories about werewolves, there's stories about murder and elves capturing girls in the forest, and lots of things like that. There are a lot of fairy tale retellings. If you're not into fairy tale retellings, I think maybe you should just read The Bloody Chamber and then not read the rest, because I think all the rest are fairy tale retellings. Maybe The Bloody Chamber is I don't know if that's originally a fairy tale story. I don't know enough about the origins of fairy tales to say that, but it's very enjoyable. And I think I would like to read more Angela Carter. I would like to read a novel. If she wrote novels. I have to do some more research about her. But it would be interesting to read a long story that she's created and see how I like it. The other thing I read in November is The Lady of Sherlock by Alfred Lord Tennyson. It was an illustrated edition that was illustrated by Geneviève Coté. And I did a whole video on it. I did a reading from it, and I will link that down below. That was a great book. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed delving into the poem and spending time there and seeing an artist's interpretation of the text. And I would highly recommend reading it yourself in the future. So overall, great month. I feel that, you know, it's interesting to read multiple books of the same type, like Victorian literature, all in one month. I'd like to spread it out a little bit more next year and kind of have a bit more of an understanding of the depth of Victorian literature, but also just of classics in general, and trying to fit them into my overall TBR in a more integrated way. So I think I'll work on that when I'm coming up with my TBRs in 2020. So thank you very much for watching, and I will be back again with another video very soon.